Sorry, I had to wait for the train to pass. We're gonna be moving in like February, so hopefully we won't be living right next to a train. But yeah, it kind of just, it comes at sporadic hours of the day. So today we're gonna do my January reading wrap up, which I can't believe it's towards the end of January. I think this book will go up probably tomorrow. So yeah, like towards the end of January. Like I said, I'm not much of a fast reader. I'm kind of like a medium. I average about 3 to 4 books a month. My reading goal for this year is actually 25 books. Since I started my full-time job, I decided to cut back. Last year it was 50 and I made it to 50, but this year I kind of wanted to cut it back to 25. Also, welcome back to my channel. Didn't say that before. Welcome back. Or hello for the first time, if you're seeing this for the first time. So yeah, let's get into my January reading wrap up. So this month I started out finishing a book that I had already started, but I'd only read like maybe 5 pages, and that is Know My Name by Chanel Miller. This book was heartbreaking. It was tough. Her writing is absolutely beautiful and poetic. It felt so real and raw, and she spared no detail. This book follows Chanel Miller. She is the survivor who was sexually assaulted by Brock Turner, found guilty of sexually assaulting her behind a dumpster. But the judge said that he didn't want his life to be ruined because of the things that he did. And so he basically gave him a very light sentence, and Brock was pretty much didn't really face real consequences, as well as there was the things that Brock's family said, like his dad talking about, 20 minutes of action. His son shouldn't face, a lifetime of consequences for, I think he said 20 minutes of action. So it was really heartbreaking. I remember when this story was in the news, I was in college at the time, and I remember reading before Chanel Miller, when she was anonymous, I remember reading her statement and thinking that it was so powerful. And to now read her book, I think it's just was probably one of the most eye-opening, amazing books that I could have started the year with. Like I said, her writing is absolutely beautiful. I highlighted some of it. Let's see if I can find a quote. So one of her quotes is, "I wanted accountability and punishment, but I also hoped he was getting better. I didn't fight to end him. I fought to convert him to my side. I wanted him to understand, to acknowledge the harm his actions had caused and reform himself." And then another quote. So this is like after the judge basically didn't give Brock really any punishment for what he did. And she says, Chanel Miller says, "The judge had given Brock something that would never be extended to me. Empathy. My pain was never more valuable than his potential." So yeah, this book I would recommend to anyone. I think that of course it deals with tough subject matter, sexual assault, rape culture. There's also some references to other cases that have been really in the news, like Christine Blasey Ford, I believe. She also talks about her in this book as well. So I think it's such a great read. Chanel Miller's writing is just amazing. It took me a while to finish this book because I feel like with books like these, they take a while to finish them because I'm really digesting the things that they're saying. And I really wanted to take my time with this book because it is very real and raw, and I just didn't want to rush through it. But I'm so happy that I did, and I'm so happy it's my first book of 2024. I didn't rate this book because I decided in 2024 I'm gonna no longer rate memoirs. I feel like it's a little weird to rate someone else's story. I understand that some people may rate memoirs based off of like how the story structure is written, but I think if you hear that in the background, that is my cat. So if you hear meowing in the background, that is my cat. He's decided to be very vocal right now. I've decided to no longer rate memoirs. I feel like some people will rate them based off of like how the story structure or the writing or stuff like that. And for me, I think it's really tough to hear someone pour their heart out about the real things that they've been through and then to rate it on a system. So, but I would just say that I would recommend this book to anyone. I think that this book is powerful. I think this book really speaks to the culture that women have to face, especially when it comes to rape culture. And I think Chanel Miller is just a powerhouse, and this book was amazing. So the next book that I finished was actually the second book in the Twisted series. This is Twisted Games, and this book follows Reese. I want to call him Rice, so bad, but it's Reese, I think. It's Reese. Anyways, and Bridget. And Bridget is the princess who, yeah, she's a princess. And so in book one, we kind of learn, in Twisted Love, we learn that she's a princess and she's Ava's best friend, and that her bodyguard that she's had for years is deciding to leave because he has his own personal matters. We learn that in book one, and this just follows Bridget's story. And so with Twisted Games, I actually say that I really liked it more than Twisted Love. I think because I felt like the story, I feel like with Twisted Love, the story felt a little chunky at parts, to where with this one, I felt like the story kind of like flowed and like a nice, felt like the story flowed really well. I feel like the story structure and flow was better in Twisted Games than it was in Twisted Love. I also thought that like the third, of course with romances, there's going to be a third act breakup. And so with this third act breakup, I felt like it wasn't, like with some third act breakups in romances, you're like, oh, you two couldn't have just talked that out a little bit. But I don't know. With this one, it felt like the third act breakup was like they were having these challenges this entire time, and now it's time for those challenges to come to a head. And I also thought that some of the twists at the end were really good. And so it definitely does a good job of setting you up for wanting to read the rest of the series. I think that with the epilogue, Ana Huang does such a good job setting you up to want to start to read the third book, which is Twisted Hate. But yeah, I gave this book like 4.75 stars. As you can see, I tabbed some of it, and I thought this book was good. Really loved the themes of, you know, choosing between your country and love, and which one would she choose in the end, even though we knew kind of like with the romance what she was going to choose in the end, but how she was going to be able to get what she wanted in her personal life but still stay true to her country. I thought that was really a good point in here. I thought that Reese was definitely less crazier than Alex. If you've read Twisted Love, Alex is a little nuts. I thought Reese was less crazier than Alex. I do think that for some people, the book might turn them off because Reese is definitely a guy who wants to take charge, and a guy that like definitely would be considered to be a little more controlling. So I think that with that aspect, I understand definitely the criticisms of this book, but I think overall the love story was really beautiful. I loved some of the twists in this book. Ana Huang does such a good job of making these books, like the love story is really interesting, but then some of the side plots and some of the secrets these characters hold, I think is also really well thought out. And yeah, I gave Twisted Games 4.75 stars. The next book I finished was through audio, and that was Lisa Jewell's None of This Is True. I listened to it through audio, and I thought this book really was good. I gave it about also 4.75 stars. I think that what I love about thrillers through the audio format is it definitely with this book, it felt like you were listening to a book, but also to a podcast. There was some music and other acting elements that I thought was done really well. And I think that this is definitely a book that I would recommend through audio. That my cat is still going off. That's definitely a book that I would recommend through audio. I think that the twists of the story were good. There were some aspects, which is why I didn't give it 5 stars. There were some aspects that I didn't quite understand. And I think that like there's a really big thing that happens, and I felt like, not to spoil anything, but I felt like it really wasn't told why this character did what they did. So that's kind of why I gave it 4.75 stars. I feel like I wouldn't have gotten the same immersive experience if I had just read it in the physical book. And I think that I would definitely recommend this book. Lisa Jewell does such a good job of writing thrillers that I feel I really connect to. Not like with the characters at all, but ones that really keep me entertained from like beginning to end. She's definitely like an auto-buy author when it comes to thrillers. I've only read Like I said, I've read None of This Is True, and now I've also read Then She Was Gone, and Then She Was Gone was like the first book that I read in 2023, and I really liked it. And I think that Lisa Jewell does such a good job. Her thrillers tend to be, kept me guessing. I kept thinking about whether or not what I'm hearing was true. I kept thinking about whether or not to trust certain characters. And I think that Lisa Jewell definitely does a good job of making you think that the story is going in one way, and then it completely flips and changes into something completely different. And the very people you thought you were listening to when you were getting the truth could actually be the liars. But then at the end, she does this little twist in the end to where you're like, do I even trust the person who I think is telling me the truth? It was great, and I definitely recommend it through audio. And finally, the fourth book that I finished for this month was Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. This is a book of short stories written by Roxane Gay. And so each one follows a different woman or a man who is connected to a woman. And there's quite a few stories in here, as well as some bonus stories as well. I ended up giving Difficult Women, it's a toss-up between 4 stars to 3.75 stars. I think this book it's good. Of course, Roxane Gay also wrote Bad Feminist. And so she's a great writer, and if you've seen some of her interviews, she's absolutely brilliant. And she's written a couple of other books as well. But I think with Difficult Women, it was difficult to get through, not in the sense of that it was bad, but difficult in the sense that these stories are really, really tough. There are stories that talk about sexual assault. There are stories that are discussing the death of a child, stories that are discussing, abuse and trauma, and it was a really tough book to get through. Each story was written so well and so realistic, and these stories, I think one of the taglines on the front says, "The characters who inhabit Difficult Women aren't just characters, they are our mothers, sisters, and partners. They are human, they are us." Each story is written in such a beautiful, poetic way, and the stories just feel real. It feels like you're actually reading someone's real story, and I think that's why it was so difficult to get through. And I, again, took my time reading this one. I actually started reading this book all the way back in 2020 was the first time that I got it. And I read the first couple of stories, and then of course took a couple years off. And so this is one of the books sitting on my TBR for the longest that I wanted to maybe kind of like knock out. I was about like 50% of the way through. And so the 3.75 is still a good score. I don't think that I had any issues. I would recommend this book to someone. I would tell them I would recommend it, but I definitely would tell them all of the trigger warnings that I just said about this book. Difficult Women is about women who are difficult, whether it's, the way that they are, the things that they've been through, the circumstances they have to find themselves in, the circumstances they put themselves in. It feels real, and it feels like every single woman that was mentioned in this book is someone that lives out in the real world. And Roxane Gay is such a great writer. I just give it 3.75 because it's just maybe it just wasn't the book that I needed for right now. It just felt like it, after reading a couple of the stories, I just felt really sad afterwards, which I think that's the point of the book. You're not supposed to feel happy, or you're not supposed to be, excited about these real life things that happen to women that can be so difficult. And so it's definitely a great short story novel that I think all women will relate to, whether it's stuff that has happened to them directly or things that have happened to them, happened to people that they love. I think that you could find, I feel like there's a story for everyone in here. And I think that it also speaks to the difficult way that women have to move in the world, whether it is, being the wife of a military man in a war that you don't believe in, or dealing with your feelings of acceptance and love in a society that thinks that only one type of body type or one type of skin color deserves to be beautiful. I think that this book really speaks to that difficulty of walking through the world, being a woman, existing as a woman, and especially in relation to dealing with the opposite sex as well. I think Roxane Gay is such a great voice for women, and this book is great. That's why I'm wrestling between four stars and 3.75 stars, because I think that it puts you in a mood. And I think that as a woman, I sometimes struggle with books that sort of remind me of the challenges of being a woman, but at the same time, I really thought that each story was told, like each story I felt like could have been an entire novel. The way that Roxane Gay writes, it just feels so poetic, but also so raw, and there were no sugarcoating of the way that these characters, what they went through and the way that they were feeling. And I think that this book just makes you feel so deeply, and it was a lot. It was a lot. But I think that she's just a brilliant writer, and I would recommend this book, but I'm wrestling between what stars to give it. But As Difficult Women by Roxane Gay. And then, so for February, I'm still trying to decide what books I'm going to read, but yesterday we got a library card because Nick says I need to stop buying so many books. So we got a library card, and I got 2 books from the library. One of them is Falling by TJ Nemen. It's Falling. And this one was really cool. It said that the only thing that's a description of this book is like this really short thing that says, you just boarded a flight to New York. There are 143 other passengers on board. What you don't know is that 30 minutes before the flight, your pilot's family was kidnapped. For his family to live, everyone on your plane must die. The only way the family will survive is if the pilot follows his orders and crashes the plane. Enjoy the flight. So yeah, I thought this was interesting. I've seen it I keep saying interesting. I need to find new words. Anyway, I saw this book through Instagram, and then I saw it also at Barnes & Noble, and it just looked really interesting. In fact, the first line in this book is, if I can get to it, the first line in this book is, when the shoe dropped into her lap, the foot was still in it. So it's gonna be a wild ride. It's gonna be a wild ride. I'm excited to read Falling by TJ Newman. Why was I struggling to say Newman? Another book I got from the library was Razorblade Tears, S.A. Cosby, I think. And Razorblade Tears. I've heard this book is also really tough. It follows 2 men, I believe, whose sons were in a relationship. Both of their sons are gay, and they were in a relationship, and then I believe something happened to them. I believe they both pass away, and then their fathers decide to team up to enact revenge. Yeah, I think to enact revenge. But I think there's also some other deeper topics within this book as well, and I've heard this book is really tough. I was debating whether or not I wanted to read the physical book or do it through audio, but when I saw it at the library, I just thought maybe it's a sign that I can read the physical book. So far, those are the only books that I'm guaranteed to read in February. I definitely want to read a lot of romances because I want to do a mix of reading romances and some Black literature, because February not only is Valentine's Day, but also Black History Month. So I definitely want to read both of those types of books during February and recommend some of those books as well. So yeah, that is everything that I read. Like I said, I'm not a very fast reader. So I average about 4 books a month. And I was very shocked that I averaged 4 books this month, but I guess I was just like ripping through books. So we'll see for February how many books I can get done. But yeah, those are all the books that I read for this month. Here they are. Have you read any of these? Do you think any of these are good? Tell me down in the comments, and thank you for watching.